Welcome to a special meeting of the Board of School Directors, Monday, April 4th. Before I turn the meeting over to Mr. Copeland and the administration, I just want to provide some background and context for tonight's meeting. Tonight's meeting is not a formal business meeting, but rather a special meeting of the board to discuss various aspects of the unprecedented increase in student enrollment in the district. Tonight's meeting will be organized much like a board committee meeting, so if you're familiar with that, you won't be surprised, where there's extensive dialogue and discussion among the board and the administration as well as the public, and an invitation for members of the public to provide feedback and commentary as well. The board has met in information sessions to remain abreast of the key issues around enrollment and to ask questions and gather information to make future decisions. This meeting is offered as a courtesy to the public to allow a lens to view the kinds of conversations that we as a board need to have before we decide on future construction, among many other things. At our March business meeting, there was an extensive dialogue regarding information and decisions related to Penguin Elementary School. This meeting will consider enrollment issues in all of our 10 schools. During both the strategic planning and superintendent search process, the community reiterated the core values that the board has considered in each of its decisions. And you've heard these values before, but they remain, it bears repeating. Maintaining small class sizes, maintaining and enhancing curricular programming, and attending neighborhood elementary schools. So these are core values that the board uses to consider many of its decisions. In addition to fiscal and cost considerations. So you'll hear some of that tonight as well. We will not again make specific decisions in this meeting, but will rather gather information for future decisions. In terms of protocol, I would ask that we hold larger, broader questions to the end of the presentation from the administration. However, if there are clarifying questions from the board or from the public, you're welcome to ask them so that you can follow along in the presentation accordingly. So with that, I'll turn the meeting over to Mr. Copeland.
Thank you, Dr. Van Lynch. Welcome, everyone. We will endeavor to be clear, concise, provide you with information, and finish in time for tip-off. Let me also just indicate that this is unlike a lot of our informal meetings. It will be recorded. So we will, just as a way of disclosure, making sure that everybody understands that and knows that, and it will be videoed and put on our website. Much of what we're going to, just an outline, much of what we'll do tonight, because of the nature of PowerPoint and the nature of a presentation, at least initially, will be a fairly linear presentation. This issue does not lend itself to linearity necessarily because it's quite three-dimensional. So I'd ask that you bear with Mr. Gannan and myself. We will be the principal presenters with support from other staff as we move through this. What we've been doing as we've been going through this process, as Dr. Van Lynch has said, one of the key goals that the board set out for the administration and me specifically was to manage the enrollment growth and the facilities needs of the district. Now, clearly, as a Board of Education, as opposed to a different kind of government agency, really can't make decisions that aren't largely reactive because when students come, we have a legal and ethical responsibility to bring them into our community and actually provide those services. So we tend to be reactive to the enrollment growth. The district was never, ever caught wondering where'd all the kids come from. The district has known for a number of years that Lower Merion was susceptible to significant enrollment growth. I suspect it's one of the reasons why we have two high schools. It's one of the reasons why they're of the size that they are, and I suspect that that's all part of the equation that's gone on for a number of years. Clearly, from conversations I've had with staff in 2012 particularly, it became really clear that the numbers of students coming into the Lower Merion schools had increased. In 2006, there were about 6,900, and it's been steadily going up to today's about 8,400 students. In 2012, the board enlisted the support of a demographer, Dijon Healy, and they did an extensive demographic review of the district. Some people thought that the numbers were such that they were concerned that, and this is, again, I'm hearing this anecdotally, that they wanted to check on that, so other demographers came in. We used, or the then board and administration used Montgomery County Planning Commission, and we used their numbers. And in April of 2014, the board got a report, an updated report that, again, continued showing strong growth within the district. During this past summer, we looked again and saw that the growth was happening even more, so we commissioned another report based on 10-day enrollment, which occurs the 10th day of the new year. And you'll hear more about that enrollment growth this evening. So what I'm going to lay out for you are some options that you may consider with some recommendations. At the heart of the recommendations, and we're a ways off before we get there, but at the heart of the recommendations is to make sure that we have the space, we have the facilities, and we have the budget to continue the kind of special opportunities that Lower Merion values for its students. Small class size, to be sure. Quality facilities, safe, expansive for the needs of a growing population and the growing minds of kids in the community, but also growing opportunities for students. This is my first year going through the budget process in Lower Merion, and one of the major parts of the budget process is staffing. That's where about 75% of our budget is the people that we hire to teach the students. And in going through a very, very in-depth budget process with zero-based budgeting, which hadn't been done before in the district, questions come up. Today, one of the Central Office administrators said to me, do we want to continue the process that we've got going on in Lower Merion and Harriton High School in terms of students doubling up in courses? I said, tell me what you mean by that. I said, well, a number of students will take 2 science courses, or 2 social studies courses, or 2 English courses, or 2 math courses, such that in the course of 4 years of high school, they might end up with 7 years of science, or 7 years of math, or 7 years of history. That's unique to Lower Merion. That's special. That doesn't happen in a lot of places. Frankly, I've never heard of that before. So one of the strategies that we're putting forth is to make sure that we have the resources that we need. Imagine being able to apply for to a school and be able to say, you know, I'm interested in MIT. I've taken 7 years of math already. And not just because it's a resume building thing, but because it's an interest that students have, and it's something that we value. You put that together, and you do the best you can with the resources you have to make sure that those things continue. So when we finally get to the recommendations, please know that those recommendations are made in a way to say, I recognize that Lower Merion is a very special place, and I recognize the responsibility the administration has to make sure that Lower Merion continues to be a very special place with very special core values. With that, I'm going to ask Mr. Ganan, Director of Facilities, to begin the process.
Good evening. As Superintendent said, I'm Pat Ganan, Director of Operations, which is facilities and a few other things. I'm going to go over... No. I'm going to go over some history here, and the history has to do with the latest in enrollment projections, what our enrollment has looked like over the past few years, and then some of the individual looks at specific schools, and some of the things that we talked about even as far back as last November. This slide shows 10-year enrollment history. So this is history. This has already happened. I happened to choose 2009 as a place to start for a comparison because to me it looked like it was the low point, kind of the same as 06, 07, 07, 08. We've gone up 20% since then. And as the superintendent pointed out earlier, we had noticed earlier that this trend was happening, and we had a consultant come in and do an enrollment projection study published in June of 2012. And There were some people who were a little bit skeptical of some of those numbers. I can assure you that 3 years later, in September of 2015, we actually have more kids than what they projected. Now, they kind of missed the boat at Penn Win. There's a lot more growth happening at Penn Win than what they predicted, but overall the numbers held. So based on those projections published in 2012, the board made a decision to invest in facilities. And in fact, they added facilities at Penn Valley and at Gladwin and at Welsh Valley, and we did interior renovations at Bala Cynwyd to create additional space. All of that to the tune of about $25 million. So that's history. We had the Montgomery County Planning Commission come in early 2015 to update this. It was 3 years after the initial study. It was time to get another look at this thing. So they came in and they came up with projections based on what had been happening during those 3 years. And their projections are shown in the first column here, the April 2015 projections. And you can see that over the 10 years, they projected a change of about just under 1,000 students. One of the things we wanted to do was wait and see what would happen in September and get those numbers cranked into the next analysis and take a look at those. So we waited till the 10th day of September, which, as you recall, was way late in September because a lot of things going on. And so when they did that and they analyzed it and did an update with using those real numbers, they did it the way they had been doing it with a 6-year average projection rate, and they came up with the numbers that you see in the center. However, they said that things had been changing so quickly in the last few years that they were changing their recommendation, and they were instead going to recommend we use a 3-year average as something that's much more reflective of the changes that have been happening in our community. So that's reflected in the third column. So if you take those numbers and project them out 10 years, the first bar there is the actual September 2015 thing. You'll see the numbers that you see there, the size of those bars. Let me go back to 2009 because that's the one I had picked earlier. If you go back to 2009 and then you go all the way out to 2024, you have 15 years and you're looking at just over 40% increase. If you choose different years to compare, you would come up with different percentages. But that's what we're looking at right now. What I'm going to do now is just go school by school and show you what the projections look like. And it's important to...
I just wanted to, in terms of our look past 2020, you want to talk a little bit about what needs to happen on a regular basis in terms of going past the year 2020?
Right. Just like we did this past year, because things are changing rapidly, it would be prudent for us to have our demographers, the Montgomery County Planning Commission, update the projections every year after we get the 10th day numbers in September. And they, of course, did that this past year. They did not republish an entire study, but they did update the projections. And depending on what else is going on, we could ask them to look at the other factors that they've identified as contributing to enrollment growth and maybe update that analysis as well.
Thank you.
So I'm going to go school by school here, starting with the elementary schools, and just look at these projections. Again, there's 3 lines shown here. The red line is what they projected in April of 15. The blue line is what they projected after they got the 10th day enrollment in September of 15, using the 6-year average. And then the green is what they recommended with the 3-year average based on the changes that they had seen happening in the recent few years. So you can see that in this case, Belmont Hills, the green line is considerably higher. That's not the case in every school. You also note that these numbers only go out 5 years, and that's on purpose because when you're dealing with an elementary school, if you get much beyond 5 years, you're in the realm of not being able to deal with actual live birth, and that is one of the drivers when looking at projections for enrollments for elementary schools.
So just in case folks haven't come to these meetings, what a demographer would tend to do in a school district to say, let's suppose you take the number of students who are born in a community, and then you say how many of them, in terms of a cohort survival, ending up in your school. Now let's say that over a course of 5 or 6 or 7 or 10 years, you see that about, I'll pick a number, 80% of the students end up coming to the school. Then depending on how many students are born any particular year, you can say with some certainty about 80% of that number is going to show up in your schools. Lower Merion has not been consistent with the live birth cohort survival analysis. In other words, more students have ended up coming to the schools than is reflected in the live birth numbers. So that has to be figured into the projections. But what Mr. Gannan is saying is the number of students born still matters significantly, and since we don't know how many are going to be born for the 2021 school year, because they haven't been born yet, we'll know that. And that's one of the reasons why we're recommending a demographic analysis updated every year. Every year that you do it, you get one more year better numbers moving forward.
So also shown on these charts are several horizontal lines, and they represent the capacity of the school. The red horizontal line represents 90% of the what we call the Lower Merion School District capacity, which is based on the way we utilize our schools and our class size guidelines. And then the dotted purple line at the top is the actual 100% of the Lower Merion capacity. So you can see there that the green line gets pretty close to that. Moving on to Kinwood, as you see here, the changes over time are not quite as significant, but we do see a bump 4 years out that could be a problem. Again, the red line is representing 90% of the capacity that we compute. The actual capacity is not shown because it's above the chart.
So you don't mind me jumping in, do you, Mr. Gannan?
Not at all.
Oh, very good. Just a couple things. One, some schools have expandable space. Other schools have very little expandable space. Kinwood is clearly one that has very little expandable space. And when we talk about the Lower Merion School District capacity, it's a concern because we make use of our buildings differently than the Pennsylvania Department of Education might suggest we would. They may suggest, well, you don't need this kind of space or that kind of space, so you could put more kids in there. This goes to the issue that I was describing in the preface of this presentation. There are student and community resources that we put a high priority on, which may mean more of a call on our space than, let's say, just a functional capacity number, which is why you see the difference between Lower Merion and those other figures. Thanks, Pat.
While we're interrupting, could you just briefly, or would you mind just briefly highlighting the class size guidelines? Because that might be, okay, apologies.
Remember, this is a linear presentation of a three-dimensional
Okay, let's keep moving here because tip-off is coming. Now we're looking at Gladwin here, and again, I had a few more annotations on these. I think when I changed the format late today, some of them dropped off, so I apologize for that. But you can see that Gladwin is going to get pretty close to 100% 4 years out based on these projections. Here's Merion, a little bit different activity going on there at Merion. But again, clearly Merion is currently above the 90% mark for capacity. Penn Valley, as we see here, and Penn Win. And of course, Penn Win is what we've been talking about as the problem. You can see that today we're somewhere around 96% of our capacity, and next year we're planning to go even higher, which is why you have approved the plan to put temporary classrooms in place this summer to deal with that while we consider our other options. I'm going to go on and look at the middle schools and high schools here. With the secondary schools, we compute the capacity a little bit differently, but again, it's based on the fact that we use a building differently than the Pennsylvania Department of Education would have us use it, and again, that goes back to the quality of our programs. You can see here that for Bala-Cynwyd, we may be okay in the next few years, but we're going to approach and surpass our capacity, and we're going to have to think about what alternatives are for that. Welsh Valley, a little bit different because here we've incorporated the additional capacity that we added with the construction in the last 2 years. Moving on to Harriton. It's interesting to note that the green line here, which is the most updated projection, is actually lower than the previous projections. I can't explain that right offhand. I'm sure our demographer could. But again, it looks like at Harriton we may be in good shape, at least overall capacity-wise. There may turn out to be some programmatic things, like we're seeing at Lower Merion High School with the chemistry labs, that cause us to have to take another look at this. And then here we are at Lower Merion. Again, I apologize, some of my annotations dropped off, but the line at the top, the dotted blue line, does reflect the capacity of the school with the renovations done in the upstairs of this building. And of course, we're starting that this summer. Our immediate goal is to create some additional science rooms, which is a programmatic thing that we have run up against, not necessarily at overall school capacity. So going back and looking at the elementaries, this is kind of a summary of the number of classrooms we need for each school based on these current projections and trying to meet the 90% of our capacity. This is the same information, but it's laid out year by year so you can see what additional classroom schools would need over time, again, based on the projections that we have today. Last fall, we walked you through a number of conceptual additions, if you will, to each school. Some were additions and temporary classrooms, some were just temporary classrooms. But the whole gist of this thing was that we had a range of ideas for creating a total solution, adding anywhere from 16 classrooms to 20 classrooms, using the cost estimates that you see there. I just recently updated this with the most recent information we have from Penn Win, so it's a little bit different than what you might have seen earlier. But again, you can see that it's not an inexpensive proposition, especially if you break it down per classroom. Then lastly, I briefly wanted to mention the concept of the kindergarten center. I know the superintendent will talk about this in a minute, but we did take a look at building a kindergarten center with 16 classrooms. It's kind of a basic kindergarten center, just enough space to be able to take half-day kindergarten out of the different elementary schools. The concept behind that would be to create additional space at the elementaries by having the kindergarten sections leave. The problem with that, as we analyzed it, was that it doesn't solve the problem at Penn Win and Penn Valley. In addition to that, you create what is essentially another school. However, it's not really a full school. It doesn't have a gymnasium, doesn't have a cafeteria. It's just set up for half-day kindergarten. And probably most significantly, you create another transportation challenge that may, in fact, only be solvable by adding a fourth tier of buses. So those were some of the problems we saw with that.
So what I'd like to do is take you through some options. Now, as I indicated, the board has tasked the administration to look at a variety of options. Some of these options are less desirable than others, but in the spirit of making sure that we do our due diligence, we've looked at a number of different things. And so I'll take you through some areas that we've looked at in the, over the course of the last several months. There are four basic approaches that we're looking at. One, many folks have said, well, can't you just redistrict? And of course, one of the problems with that is if all of the students are, if all of the schools are experiencing growth, simple redistricting becomes a problem. But I'll talk a little bit about that in detail. What if the kindergarten center was not a kindergarten center, but a new school? And it was a full-size school at the property that we have. Now, the property that we have is formerly the St. Justin's Church adjacent to Welsh Valley Middle School. Or what if the value is that we go with neighborhood stabilization, meaning keeping the neighborhoods and the school zones pretty much the way they are. And finally, let's suppose you abandoned the long held core value of increasing of class size. So the map that you see on the screen and the map that the community members may see around the room, for every dot that you see there, you see at least a student resides there. So one dot might be one student, one dot might be 10 students. Correct, Pat?
If they're all in the same
And they're all, well, yes, okay. And you can, but you can see the basic population density of the situation. So one of the things that people have said, well, since if you can look in the bottom, do I get it? Yeah, if I go right here, this is Penn Win, which is in the bottom zone of the school. You can see it has a significant number of students. This zone as well as this zone over here to the side right here both go to Penn Win. So folks have said, well, suppose you move students into Marion Elementary School. Well, so if you did that, first of all, you have to remove about 130 to 140 students from Penn Win just to get it to the point where you don't have to lose any more classrooms. It doesn't return any core space that's already been lost. Core space are things like art rooms, music rooms, gymnasiums, cafeterias, cafetoriums. Those are core spaces. You'd need at least 130 students. They all couldn't fit in Marion. So students would have to be transferred to either Penn Win or Marion. The problem that we then have is that Marion has a very tight neighborhood area around it, and we get concerns around that as we do with Penn Win, and you also may need more core space to build onto at Marion. And in fact, the core space that we're most concerned about is the cafeteria space. It's not easily expandable. It means taking over a loading dock and some fairly substantial construction. Marion has also already lost, as I recall, their music room. And that's now a classroom, so they have music on the stage. So they're already one of the schools that's lost it. So you'd have to go to Penn Win. You may need to take some space at Penn Valley, the Wins, the Valleys. I'm going to get them straight, I promise. Penn Valley, but there again, you also need to expand the cafeteria and expand some core space there. There are also issues with getting clearances for impervious surfaces at Penn Valley. Now, there is some concern that programmatically, Bala-Cynwyd Middle School might be running out of space. We're going to further investigate that, but if that were to be true, this redistricting, assuming students would move from Marion and Penn Valley, I guess just Marion would go to Welsh Valley. That might relieve some load on Bala-Cynwyd Middle School. But all in all, this is not neither is it a perfect solution, nor is it a solution without some significant problems, not the least of which is upsetting the current feeder patterns. Some people have said, well, does everybody from an elementary school have to go to the same middle school? Well, I mean, technically no. But again, one of the core values in Lower Marion is that when students start in kindergarten, they follow their schoolmates through the elementary years, and they follow them to the same middle school. What if you build a new school, and a real school as opposed to a kindergarten center? Well, one of the things we have to be aware of is the enrollment limit is finite at 550. In other words, it's a very small footprint to build on. It's unlikely that that could hold more than 550 students. And it doesn't necessarily mean that there might not be some additional classrooms that would be built elsewhere. It requires cascading redistricting. What do I mean by cascading redistricting? Let me go to the map again. Here's the map. In order to get students to move from Penn Win, some of them would have to move into Penn Valley and to Marion. Then some students would have to leave Penn Valley and go to the new school, and some students would have to leave Marion and go to the new school. There may be other cascades. This would be a significant amount of movement throughout the entire district. So you following me? Students would have to move out of Penn Wynne, move into Penn Valley, move into Marion, and then students at the northern end of those districts would have to move out of there into the new school. So cascading redistricting is one problem. It also would cost about $40 million. It would cost about $30 million for just the construction of the school, and somewhere around $8 to $10 million for parking. There's not enough parking spaces. The only way to get the parking would be to put underground parking in, and an underground parking structure. Well, you could put a tiered parking structure there too. That's about $5 million. So whether it's $5 million or $10 million, you're talking about between $35 and $40 million. Now, if you remember, Mr. Ganan's total numbers for the other plan totaled $30 million. So this is about $10 million more than before. Might solve the Bella Cynwyd problem if, I emphasize, if there's a Bella Cynwyd problem. And here's an interesting concept with this. You do less hoping and more control. You heard me say earlier that one of the things that befalls a school district is we don't have control over approving new housing. We don't have a control over, this actually puts control in the hands of the district, but I would argue not without some serious upset along the way. Another strategy, neighborhood stabilization. Neighborhood stabilization basically is keeping things where they are and building on as needed. So we would, under this scenario, you build onto Penn Wynne now, and you see how partner schooling eventually goes. And I'll talk, well, maybe now's a good time to talk about partner schooling. Partner schooling, and there's been some discussions about that, means that students moving in new to the district between June 1st and July 1st, really after July 1st, would, if in order to keep the class sizes low, they would go to a neighbor or a partnering school. The district would provide the transportation. We looked at this last year, not to implement it, but we did a look back to say, if we had implemented this program last year, what would happen? There were 6 new classrooms that we opened up in the elementary schools to the tune of about $600,000 at minimum, and we figured we could have done 3, saving the district, but also saving core facilities. Sometimes when you open up a new class, you lose a music room, you lose an art room. So for relatively few students moving in, the whole school loses their program. So under neighborhood stabilization, we would, since the board has passed this policy, this would give us an opportunity to see how this policy played itself out. The cost is less than a new school. It's incremental. You can wait and see how the numbers are rolling out before you make decisions. We might use or employ a long or long-term use of temporary classrooms. Now again, I know this isn't something that the community likes, but in the case, for instance, of Penn Valley, if you looked at it, there's a peak and then a drop-off within a couple of years. It may be appropriate to say, you know what, rather than build at Penn Valley, use the temporary classrooms until the numbers drop off. Saves money, and then you remove them. It might, emphasis on might, create a need for something to happen at Bella Cynwyd Middle School in terms of temporary classrooms. Now, class size. This slide's for you. You had asked about the targets. These are the current targets, class size guidelines in Lower Marion. 20 in kindergarten, 22 in first, and you can see all the way up to 25. We've already passed a policy will allow us to go N+1, meaning this N+1. Now, how does that work? Well, what's happened historically in Lower Marion is, let's pick a first or a second grade class. Let's suppose there's 4 first grade classes in a building. What's happened is if throughout the summer the 23rd student moved into one of those classes, they stayed. If the 23rd student moved into the second of those 4 classes, they stayed. If a student moved in to make the 23rd student in the 3rd class, Lower Merion broke the classes up into 5 classes. We're recommending if the first 2 could stay, leave the N+1 to 23. But again, because people have asked, not that we're recommending it, here's what happens if you go to an N+1, an N+2, or an N+3. So what does an N+2 mean? It means if the class size was capped at 20, it would be now 22. If the class size was 25, it would now be 27. N+3 would be 28 if the class size was 25. And you can see for the 2016-2017 school year, you can see that going to N+1 doesn't change things much, for example, in Belmont Hills. But if for some reason you needed another class, N+2 would allow you to stay under. So you can see what happens in 2016-17, 2017-2018, and also 2018-19, and 2019 and 20. So you can see that this is not a long-term solving of the problem unless you significantly increase the class size as you go along. And then 2020 and 2021. So at the elementary level, between 80, just keep some things to keep in mind. At the elementary level, between 80 and 100% of our classes are mainstream. That means there's a wide variation of student needs within a class. Certainly, people have said, well, couldn't you mitigate the class size with in-class support, hiring extra teachers? You might. You've heard me talk about high schools in terms of the activities for students, but we make a special effort to make sure that the college prep classes are as low as possible. Again, we're not apologizing for that. We think that that works to the benefit of our kids. And finally, low class size is the Lower Merion brand. It's something that the community has believed in for a long time, and the administration is supportive of that. The secondary schools, we do have some time. We think Harriton can handle the growth, and if not, Harriton has the room to expand if necessary. As you saw, Lower Merion can handle the growth, particularly using the district administration offices. Bala-Cynwyd, I've asked Mr. Ganan and our architect to review the programmatic needs that the principal has laid out to see what might happen there. Welsh Valley, because we just added 12 classrooms, we believe can handle the growth. But of course, if you move students from Bala-Cynwyd into Welsh Valley, that opens that up to some question. So I'm going to give you a series of recommendations. And let me preface these comments by saying many of these recommendations are not things that we like. They're just a palette of tools to use should we need them over time. See the impact of partner schooling. Again, partner schooling isn't something that we think is necessarily the way to solve the problem or necessarily a good thing. If a family moves into the community in August or September, we'd like them to go to the neighborhood school that the kids surrounding them are, but it's an opportunity. We believe the temporary classrooms will help us at Penn Win and give us some opportunities there. But because of where Penn Win is located, fairly distant from many other schools, and because the core space at Penn Win is already being impacted, you've already got doubled up phys ed classes in the gymnasium. We think that space is critical at Penn Win. After the 10th day enrollment, we would look at other schools. Build with prudence. I know nobody likes it, but maybe consider temporary classrooms until numbers drop off, as we talked about at Penn Valley. You could go to an N+2 when you need to, not because we wanted to, but because after the school year started, we already have a number of classes that have reached this level. Again, not desirable, not what we want, but in a fix, when you're trying to decide what to do, it may be something we have to move to. The board has already passed a resolution and a policy that allows the district to decide where new housing, particularly multiple occupancy housing, will be located if there's an approved new condo unit or something of that nature. I would argue that redistricting would be something you would avoid as much as you possibly can. I've seen it in other districts. Even when it was absolutely necessary, it often causes enormous upset in the community, and I would recommend that we look very long, very hard at whether that's something we wanted to go to. What are the pros and cons? Well, with the neighborhood stabilization program, it allows decision-making closest to the available data. You're not saying, some people have said, well, we want a long-range master plan. Well, you can't have a long-range master plan until you know long-range how many students are coming in to the district. Students come in, they have an address, they have a birth certificate. We have a moral, ethical obligation to make sure they have a quality education. The neighborhood stabilization plan is less costly. We think it comes closest to supporting Lower Merion School's core values. What are some cons? Well, it's less proactive. It is more reactive, to be sure. And you do get larger schools. Timeline. By May, we would ask that there be approval for the Penn-Win design. I had really hoped to wait till the 10th day enrollment of September, but because the approval that we have says that we have to remove the temporary classrooms within 2 years, I think we're asking the board to make that decision in May for Penn-Win. But for the rest of the schools, in October, we would get an updated demographic report, and by November, approve the final Penn-Win design, review projections for Belmont Hills, Bala Cynwyd Middle School, and Penn Valley, because those are the schools that we believe are perhaps on the edge of needing new classrooms. If that were the case, by December, we would ask the board to approve any temporary classroom projects. That would then, of course, have to go to the Board of Commissioners. In January, we would bid the Penn-Win project, and in March, award the Penn-Win project. So that's where we are. As I indicated, this is a balance. We want to do and recommend what we think is in the best interest of the school district, and we're prepared to answer any questions the Board of Public may have. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Copeland. Would you mind keeping the presentation up in case there are questions specific to certain slides? So at this time, I want to open it up to the board for questions regarding the presentation.
I broke it.
Okay. Ms. Ackman, please.
Sure, I have 2 questions, and thanks for laying that out in a very focused way. Yeah, sorry. So my questions are, and I think I've asked this before, for those of us who were not here or were not involved when a new elementary school, specifically Belmont Hills, was reopened here, can you just talk about how that would happen? And just the elementary schools have really strong cultures, and based on your experience, how something like that could happen. And my second question is the idea of extra teachers in classrooms or classroom aides versus the cost of expanded facilities. Have you all done any analysis about that?
So let me make sure I understand in terms of opening, are you talking about like building a new school?
Yes,
Okay.
just in terms of that option. How do you make something like that happen,
Well,
beyond
if-
the redistricting issues?
Oh, beyond the redistricting
Well,
issues.
and maybe in addition to.
Well, it could happen in a number of ways. One of the things that the board would have to make a decision on is for students, let's say, in the terminal grade of 5th grade, do you allow them to grandfather in the old school and so forth and so on? A lot of people like the idea of their kids going to a new school, so it's a celebration. I don't know exactly what folks did at Belmont Hills. The folklore is they made sure there was one really popular principal. And they made sure that there were all kinds of accommodations like that, and we are certainly not above doing something like that. Because you want people, to the greatest extent, who are going to experience change to feel good about the change. A lot of community outreach, a lot of support, and a lot of conversations. Your second question was the classroom teacher.
Well, if in the option that talked about increasing class size, and you added a teacher's aide, that has costs the way extra
Sure.
facilities has costs. So just if you could talk a little
Sure.
bit about that.
And I wasn't necessarily even recommending a teacher assistant. I was even looking at
Okay,
a regular teacher being in there. A teacher assistant is budgeted at, I'm going to look at Mr. Orlando, $60,000-$70,000 is a teacher assistant. Obviously, a teacher we budget at about $100,000. So you keep perhaps a core facility, but I don't know that you save particularly in terms of dollars.
Right. Okay, thank you. Just thought that was the further illustration.
Please. I'd like to follow up on your first question. I just want to be clear that I understand in terms of building a new school, because if we built a new school, I'm assuming on the St. Justin properties, that site, the maximum number of students was 550, correct? So, so a couple of things would happen there, right? In other words, we can't just, we'd have to do this cascading redistricting, meaning some kids would go to a new school and some kids would go to one of the other
Pat, could you
older
put that
schools.
could you put the map up there again, please? You're probably going to have to stay close to the media.
I mean, one concern that board members have talked about that, we're obviously not thrilled about, and I think a lot of people in the community are not thrilled about, is that some of the schools are growing, much larger than other schools. And so we're starting to get at the elementary level, pretty significant disparities in size. And we sort of said, like, at what point is an elementary school not an elementary school anymore? But what I understand, thank you. That was, all of us have been talking about that. That's not my idea. But what I'm understanding, I just want to make sure I'm understanding this correctly. So tell me if I'm wrong, which is if we do that, we're still going to have an imbalance in school size. In other words, one could make the argument, and I'm not making this argument, I'm playing devil's advocate here. You could say, well, redistricting, as we all know, is horrible and painful, but if it resulted in sort of more equal size elementary schools across the entire district, that might be something we would bring to the community and say, what do you think? But my understanding is that doesn't solve that problem for us, because we're only building one school of 550, and so that doesn't really accomplish that for us, in addition to the fact that it costs more money. So I'm just, again, I'm not arguing for any point here. I'm just trying to understand what the trade-offs are, and that's not going to equalize the sizes of our elementary schools, correct?
Well, let me go up here for just a second. Here's the site, or at least here's the site of land that we own. If we were starting fresh with a bunch of kids in those schools, what you would do is you would take some concentric circles and build out until you found enough kids to get into the school. Well, you can see very quickly, as soon as you do that, you start to actually get into the walk zones of surrounding schools, because so many of the schools are concentrated in one side of town. So it requires this movement up and up. So you would, I mean, I guess the question is, how many kids could you possibly get out of, let's say, Gladwin? So I haven't figured it out, but Gladwin would go down maybe, do you remember how many? I mean, Gladwood wouldn't go down appreciably is what I mean. This would still stay around 700. So you'd have one of 500, you'd have one of 680, 700. So I can't say that it wouldn't reduce it, but I think it would be a stretch to suggest that it would equalize it. If that answers your.
Yeah, no, that does, sorry, yeah, this is on, that does answer my question. And so, and that's true as well in the very first option around, I forget what you call all these options, give me 1 second.
Just moving, just solving the Penn win by moving.
Right, in other words, you're still,
Well, that doesn't do anything with Gladwin.
right,
It would increase the size of Penn Valley and increase the size of Marion,
okay.
and still leave Penn
So
Win
I just want
fairly
to make
large.
sure I was sort of clear on
Yeah.
what the benefits and limitations of various options are. Obviously, there's not one ideal option that solves all the problems, makes all the schools equal, and costs no money, because if we had that one, we would, that would be easy.
Believe
That would have been the
me, I
easy
would
one.
have,
I
that
know,
would have.
I know. So, but I appreciate the sort of laying out
Sure.
of the sort of advantages and limitations of different options. And then there's also the other possibility, of course, where you would go and look for potentially additional land to build a school, right? to
I've
build
been
a school.
looking.
I know, well, we've been looking for land for quite some time for a number of different reasons. So that hasn't proven to be an easy fix either. So, okay, thank you.
Mrs. Pollard?
Yeah. Mr. Copeland, also with the building of this new school, you would still have to continue to put additions on the other schools, correct?
Now, what we're saying is, it's a possibility. We just don't know. We couldn't rule it out. Is that fair to say, Mr. Gannan?
I think so at this point, yeah.
But, okay, just to follow up on Ms. Pollard's point, it seems though that given the issues that Penn Win is experiencing, even with a finite number of students at a new school, there would still need to be some expansion at Penn Win, correct? Or
Well, if
are we
we're,
not suggesting that anymore?
if we were to remove enough students out of Penn Win to not do construction, we would have to keep in mind that at its current level, Penn Win is experiencing problems using its core facilities.
Right.
Specifically, it's for physical education.
Okay. Mr. Driscoll?
Thank you. I'd like to leave this map up, but I think what this map says to me is if you follow the line between Penn Valley and Belmont Hills and Gladwin, two things. Gladwin geographically is half the township, but also most of the students are compacted in the other half of the township. And that leads to problems of finding a proper location. I do want to point out, you see where Penn Win is, you see the green space there, kind of the bottom. That includes Lankenau, and on the cross street is St. Charles. Bala Cynwyd, it looks like there's tons of land. That's all of its commercial development up along the Schuylkill. Look to Gladwin. Up in the upper right corner, you see a big chunk, Philadelphia Country Club. Long story short, we are a very developed township. Looking for 20, 30, 15 acres here and there is not going to happen overnight, if at all. So to me, when I see this map, I just want to make the point that, like, building a school, we can't just put our finger on the dot and say, yeah, I would like to as a school say, yeah, that's where it should be. But given the residents, the commercial development we have, I don't think we have that option. We have to build where we can find space. And to Bob's point, we don't have 500-acre farms that we can just pick 20 acres from. That's been done. That was done 100 years ago. So I talk about the new school. Yes, we have the land at St. Justin's. is it really in the right place if you could really put it where you, that's not where you'd want to put it, is it? I mean, wouldn't you want to kind of get it more east than where it is?
Well, you should have asked me before you bought, I mean, clearly, things would be a whole lot easier right around here. Then you're far enough away from other walk zones, you can start to collect large group of students and not do the cascading and not have a situation. Look, and I mean this sincerely, I think it was a wise move to take the land when you got it. And I'm not saying that at some future time there might not be a very good use for that. I'm not seeing a particular opportunity at this point for either the kindergarten center or a new school. A new school would work. Everybody just has to understand there's going to be significant amounts of community distress. I think everybody, recognizes that.
Mr. Fetterman, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Copeland. I just wanted to, with regard to the discussion even of a new school, I think if we, according to your presentation, by taking a moderate approach, or shall we say a cautious approach, that we're not really at that point where we'd be thinking about building a school until we see when the Montgomery County Planning Commission comes back again and really sees where these numbers are taking us. And that the prudent thing would be, as I think, as you suggested, is to make the plans at Penn Win. And I guess the question then is, and some people in the audience think, how do we, could you just explain again the timeline for doing that?
In terms of the construction of Penn Win?
Yes.
Well, right now, we've got a compressed timeline because we have approval for 2 years, and it takes about 18 months. I'm looking at architects and people who aren't paying attention to me there. About 18 months at a short clip, I would assume. For construction, really, for almost a full 2 years for design and construction, wouldn't you say?
You're talking about for a new school?
No, just for the addition at Penn Win.
I think we're probably in the 15 to 18 months.
For construction, okay. So that's why we're recommending that, that the board, if the board votes to approve the plans in May, that gives us till the fall to get the plans done. We still don't think we'll have land development done that soon. So it really puts us on a tight timeline. But we can go to bid without that there. We just can't award the bid until we get the land development approvals. So an expedited move would be allow us to begin the design process in May, get the design completed and approval in November. Hope that we get the land development by January or February, award in March. Again, we can put the project out to bid before we get land development approval. We just can't award it until we get it.
I'm going to come to the public momentarily. Please.
Thanks, everybody. Couple of questions regarding the map. The green block that's Penn Win, that's separate from the rest of the green block of Penn Win?
No, that's a housing complex.
No. This green block here.
Uh-huh.
Do we know how many students is in that block?
I'm sure we do, but I couldn't tell you right now.
Could we get that? And also, I'm curious, how many students are in that block? The other one that goes to Penn Valley? And regarding the Miriam estate, which is finally moving forward, well, I don't know that all this other construction that's going on is going to have significant impact on our enrollment. It'll have some, but I don't know that it's be significant. The Miriam Estate, I think, is one development that could, because of its proximity, it's right there next to the park.
Where are you? talking?
The Miriam Estate is the old Strawbridge Estate, which if you go down Penn Road underneath the train bridge there, do you know where I am? If you go out the front of Lower Marion High School, make a left.
Right.
Go to the second light where the synagogue is, make a
Okay,
left.
all right.
Right before you go under the bridge,
Okay.
on the left-hand side, there's a huge estate there, which is just finally now coming under construction for apartments.
It's adjacent to the Wynwood train station.
Yes.
Right there.
Okay.
And I don't know if we have the details on what they're building there and how big and what types of apartments they are, but if they're multi-bedroom apartments, I think the possibility of drawing families into those apartments is high. And so that is probably Penn Valley, or maybe Marion.
Well, it's
or maybe
anywhere
Belmont Hills.
it's anywhere you decide it
Right,
should go.
because it's,
Right.
exactly, because it's that, under that other policy. So I'd just be curious to know if we have any sense of how big that is, what kind of apartments they're putting in, if you could find that out. I've mentioned this sort of in one-to-one conversations. I'm going to point out right about here is a property for sale that's 13 or 14 acres. And if we did consider building new, building a building, it would be possible theoretically to populate that building without the cascading redistricting, I think. I mean, I don't have the numbers, the exact numbers of where students are, but it would add $10 million to the cost because it's property we don't own. And I think the asking price for the property is 9.5. But if that is an option that we're willing to consider, it could then also handle, if we did want to do a little cascading, we might be able to relieve some pressure off of Marion or Kenwood if need be. It would definitely take pressure off of Gladwin, Penn Valley, and Penn Wyn without cascading. So I just, you know, it's probably not a good option. It's probably too expensive. It might require approval by referendum, which would be so much fun. But I think it's another option we at least have to consider and think about as we go through this process.
Well, but Diane, I mean, you've said it before, absolutely, but my point was you're putting a school where students predominantly aren't. I mean, that's predominantly. I mean,
No, but, I mean, you could conceivably take this chunk right here and send it to there and.
But you haven't helped Marion, Kenwood,
No.
or Belmont Hills.
That's why I'm saying, I mean, but right now that we're not dire at those schools and conceivably we could, I mean, it's just an idea. It's something that I haven't thought through with any great amount of effort. I don't have the numbers, so I in terms of where students are living, and, you know, some of those dots mean one kid and some of those dots mean 20 kids if it's an apartment building. So it's just another element to consider as we go through this.
It is, but it has it has significant issues.
Every one of them has problems.
I'm not.
Dr. O'Leary?
Yeah, I guess one clarifying question first. When you showed early in the presentation, there was something about adding sort of piecemeal at all the elementary schools, and the dollar sign on that was 12 million, and I'm wondering if that's still the right number, or if we've adjusted that at all.
there was one that showed, I think it showed a low and a high.
Yeah, it went from,
Right, so this is, there's quite a bit of,
16, okay.
there's quite a bit of leeway within this, depending on whether we're talking about the use of temporary classrooms, the number of classrooms we're talking about, where exactly on each site we would build.
Okay.
Well, the one before is.
That's fine, it seemed low compared to the cost of Penn Win, so that's why I was trying to figure out, but I guess the bulk of that would be spent at Penn Win if we're adding piecemeal. It doesn't matter, it just struck me as being low compared to the Penn Win price tag. So that's fine, and I just want to make sure I understand this timeline. So we're trying to make a final decision on a Penn Win addition next month because we only have 2 years on the temporary classrooms? Am I understanding that timing correctly?
If you want to have a permanent classroom ready to go for the 18-19 school year, we need to move now. As I can't comment on what it means that we got a 2-year approval. The actual wording of the condition of approval says we can ask for more, but I don't know what that means.
Okay. I mean, I'm concerned that if we try, I like the idea of delaying things as much as possible because I have a very vivid memory of when the high school opened and was too big. And everybody said it's too big, it's too big, it's too big, right up until it was too small. So I do like that we are sort of being conservative and collecting data and responding as needed, because I think big 10-year plans, when you have 2-year changes, don't make a ton of sense. My concern with trying to get a final plan in May is that should we need changes or should we need to adjust, we will have spent a great deal of taxpayer money in the meantime. So I'm concerned about rushing that May decision.
I just want to add a piece to your point, Dr. O'Leary, and the Penn Win conversation has been ongoing for some time in facilities, in meetings, et cetera. And what was presented to the board several months ago was the need to do temporaries, to give the administration some breathing room, and the board to really have a robust dialogue such as this to make a decision. Mr. Bernadowitz, principal of Penn Win, was here last meeting, being very clear that the gym space is squeezed, that you have issues in terms of cafetorium, but he can manage them. And so I think we need to be very mindful of our students' experiences in a very cramped school building at the moment. And so I'm a little cautious about delaying because, our students in this district are going to Penn Win every day. And we need to be mindful of the kinds of decisions that we want to ensure their quality of educational experience, just like in the other 9 buildings.
Yeah, I didn't mean to imply that the diligence hadn't been done or that it hadn't been thought through. More what I'm concerned about is that we know more about our enrollment with passing time. So it's not, this has been thought through and presented, and it's been going on for a long time, so that it's not that we're ready, it's that the longer we can wait, the more information we get. So I thank you for the clarification.
I think there's a balance. The problem that we have is the only time that you have the absolute perfect information is the day before. So if you could build it in 2 or 3 days, you'd have a perfect situation. No matter what we do, we've got a fairly long lag time, and there's nothing perfect. There's nothing that suggests that the Penn Win situation is going to improve And I think that's the thing. So I don't know that in the nth degree it makes a big deal. I think we need to do something, because as I mentioned, the principal he's already lost 2 classrooms, I think, which were large group instruction areas. And so they're already under a bit of a crunch.
Let me just clarify what I said earlier. The condition of approval we received for our temporary classrooms limits us to 2 years, but it clearly says we can go back and ask for more time. The reason I said I don't know what that means is because it doesn't state what criteria the commissioners may use to determine whether they will give us more time or not. That's all I meant by that.
I have to say, I think if we were in a serious crunch and had, I mean, if the options were pull the temporaries up and move, what is it, 80 kids? How many kids are we talking about putting in those things? And squeezing them in there or leaving them up for another year, I got to believe the commissioners would hear that. And I think we'd need some help from the community on that. But I mean, I'm not too worried about if we have a good reason for not being able to get that extension.
Well, I mean, I would hope so, except we asked for, I believe, 3 years, and they only gave us 2, so.
Well, right, but they didn't say 2, and don't you dare come back at me again. They just said 2 and.
Of course not, but we're trying to actually plan around what we've been told, so.
I would just add to what Diane said as well, is that, I mean, I just think that, I don't know if 4 months or 3 months is going to make a difference with the number of kids. I mean, I think that's really the bottom line. And so that, I don't want to give the impression that we're going to make a move based on a 2-year limitation, knowing, because I think Diane's right. I think in the end, if we really needed more time, we'd get it. But the fact of the matter is, do we really need it now, knowing what we know about the Penn Win enrollment? I guess that's the question. I mean, I don't think.
But while we asked for 4 years, we weren't demanding that they stay for 4 years. So had enrollment actually dropped in 2 years, we would have been pulling them. So there was never, ever on this board or this administration's part of, 4 years and we're going to leave them empty.
No, I don't think anybody's saying that.
But then why, if we are showing enrollment numbers that have been increasing left and right, we are seeing, David, I'm going to comment.
I'm not arguing with you, Ben.
But but my point is, we asked for 4, and we would have been diligent and reasonable with the 4. To make it now, we got to come back, makes me wonder, well, I was confused by that, because we'll pull them when we don't need them.
Right, but you just misunderstood completely what I said. What I said was it's unlikely that it'll make a difference whether it was 2 years or 4 years, because the numbers probably dictate that we're going to have to do something with the children there, either most likely build. That's all I'm saying.
Then, fair point, then why did it matter?
Well, that's not for us to say.
Yeah, and it's really, I don't think that this is a big issue. I truly believe that the commissioners, if we go in there with our feet to the fire and say, look, we don't have a choice, we need to leave these up another year, I can't in any imagination here imagine the commissioners saying no. So I just think we shouldn't let that be the driver of our decisions. But as David said, the numbers are there anyway, so it's not like I mean, we're stuck anyway. But it's I just don't think we have to. We should allow ourselves to be limited in our options because of that.
I also think it's probably more likely we'll need more time, even if we do build, because we're on such a tight timeline to build. And you can speak to the construction timelines and how easily the deadlines are met and the approvals are gotten. Even if we build, we may need more time for the modulars as well. So.
Please.
Pat, can you go back to the enrollment growth we've had over the last 6 or 7 years? I think it's the other presentation. I don't know if it's.
The enrollment one?
Yeah. I just want to, when Pat pulls it up, while it shows 20%, I think we need to talk really about the raw number and give it some context of the town, of where we are. To go from 6,952 to 8,341 is about 1,389 students in 6 years. The only building that has more students today is Lower Marion High School at 1443. It's 10-day. In 6 years, it's like adding Harriton. In 6 years, it's like adding 2 elementary schools. Not 1, 2. It's like adding 1.5 middle schools. If you don't want to do that math of comparing it to schools, 1,300 kids divided by 10 schools, if it's even, is 130 schools, 130 per school, excuse me. At 25, you're talking 6 classrooms per building. So I appreciate the 20%, but 1,300 kids in 6 years is, when you look at it in relation to what we have, I think shows that this is a lot of work. We've done a lot of work. We have added spaces here and there. We've repurposed rooms. And unfortunately, when you go out another 8 or 9 years, we're looking to add another 1,400 kids. Another high school, if you were to put them all in one place, in a township that's fairly built. So I just find the numbers interesting when I look at it that way. Thank you.
Please.
I wanted to go in a different direction, and this is for clarification, the partnering schools as a possibility. Could you explain clearly more?
Suggest I didn't do a very good job. So partner schools really is an attempt to stay as close to the stated class size targets that we have. So this year, what happened was we had 6 occasions where after students had reached the target population, we waited for another student to come and then another student to come, and then we broke the class up into if there were 4 classes, the 5th class, the 5th class. We did that 6 times this past summer. When we went back and looked at the situation and you said, okay, a family moved into Penn Win, it's going to be the 22nd kid, it'll make 22 kids in all of the, 23 kids in one of the existing classrooms. Then what would happen is that student would, any student who comes after July 1 would basically go into a pool. And then the administration, based on board policy and the guidelines and the administrative recommendation, would say, okay, where do we have space for this student within the feeder pattern of the schools, of the elementary schools that student would be in? So that way, if the student had to stay in that school or chose to stay in the school, this board has made the decision that the parents would choose, if there was room, get to stay in the school that they were partnered in. Or if there was room, they come back to the original school. So that was a concession that the board made during the policy discussion. And then the board also said that if there was a sibling situation, that would be given preference, and if they moved into a walking zone, that would be given preference. Just as an addendum to that, at a meeting, I guess a couple of months ago, of the Montgomery County superintendents, somebody said at the end of the meeting, "Does anybody have a class size cap where kids go to different schools?" And I said, funny you should mention that. We just passed that policy, and it was like, can I see that? 4 others said, can I see that? And a bunch others also said, well, we already do that. So this is not atypical. It's not preferred. It's one of a series of options that the district has while it's going through some really tough enrollment increases in an attempt to be expeditious as well as appropriate for all the kids in the school.
Thank you, Mr. Copeland. So I'm going to take one more question from the board, and then I'm going to open it up to public comment. We're going to be a little more formal than I anticipated. It's great to see everyone here, but I want to make sure everyone who wants to speak has an opportunity. So I'm going to ask that you sign in with Mr. Orlando. We are going to limit it to 3 minutes, but if you want to come back after a group of folks have spoken, you will be welcome to do that. So, Mr. Bonaventura.
Just real quick, piggybacking on the whole partner schooling thing, might that help us with Ballackinwood? I mean, we've only talked about it in terms of elementary school, but might that help us at Ballackinwood where in what, 3 years or so, we're looking potentially at some trouble? Right, new,
Yeah.
but we frequently get kids between
Well, that's
fifth
true.
and sixth
That is
grade.
true.
But I thought, like you said earlier, that, at a certain point, Welsh Valley could hold a number of kids unless we start redistricting kids from Ballackinwood to Welsh Valley.
We
So
do.
what's the-
One of the things that I'm still in the throes of investigating is what are the programmatic indications. So in one particular case, I know one of the principals is concerned that they're about to see a significant increase in just sixth grade, which might create an anomaly that we have to get over for a period of time. But to go back to your, I suppose it could. We honestly haven't looked at that at this point.
Just, can I,
Go ahead, Dr. O'Leary, please.
I just wanted to follow up that, like, when we're exploring things at the middle school, there might also be people who would volunteer to switch schools, and we haven't been forced to explore that yet.
Oh, no, if somebody asks to move, and it's going to work to our advantage, we do allow that. We do ask them to provide their own transportation, though.
Okay, so we can start with, if there are folks who want to speak, if you wouldn't mind signing up with Mr. Orlando, we'll take the first speaker. Mr. Orlando, you want to call our first speaker? Oh, could you come to the mic, please? Sorry, would you please come to the mic? We're being videoed.
Hello. So I just had 3 quick questions. I didn't see them addressed. The first one,
I'm sorry, sir.
Oh, sure.
Your name and where you reside?
Dan Donovan. I live at 2 Wiltshire, so I represent Penwyn. And I have 2 kids in Penwyn right now. The first question, an obvious one, is who pays for it and how? I think
Who pays for what, sir?
any of the options being presented.
Well-
So whether it's a bond, whether it's tax-based, whether it's, sorry, I just didn't see that
So it
fully
would-
addressed.
It would either be out of a capital reserve or a bond.
Okay. And then just 2 other quick ones. The second one was what the margin of error was for the data that you presented. I didn't see that included. And the third piece is just about the green space. I think parking is pretty dangerous already at Penwyn, as is the traffic flow. So I think everybody is very concerned about just the impact to the surrounding area there, just to the kids, to the safety, to the fabric of that community. So those are just my points, comments. Thank you.
I can, we don't get a report which includes a margin of error from the Montgomery County.
It was plus or minus 1.
Was it plus or minus?
Plus or minus 1,
Okay.
yes. Right,
Oh,
after,
okay.
up to 5 years.
I stand correct. I didn't get
Ready,
a
close.
plus or minus.
We're not using our microphones. We need to use the microphones, so.
So can you restate that, Bob?
So it's plus or minus? Is that what you said? 1. I said
Yes.
Well, depending on how many years out you are.
Up to 5.
No, the first year it's 1, the second year, I think goes up to like 2.5 after 3, and it goes up to 5% after 5.
It goes up to 5.
I'll check it.
Yeah, we do get
minimal.
it, but we do get
Remember seeing it.
a margin of error.
So the reason I ask it, it's obviously germane when you hit it, when you cement ceiling with Penguin, that 2-3% times.
Next speaker, please.
Hi, I'm Sarah Rosenbaum. I live in Penwyn, 1425 Dorset Lane. And I have, first of all, I have a concern. As I understand it, the demographics are based on live birth analysis. your demographer in terms of your growth rate. My concern is that that's maybe substantially underestimating the growth in areas like Penwyn. On my block, I'm one of 3 families within the last year that has moved into the district, coming for the schools. We have moved into houses that were previously occupied by people whose children were grown and gone, and we've added 6 kids in this last year on our block to your district. And that, the birth weight, the live birth analysis doesn't cover all of us trying to move here and take advantage of these wonderful schools. And in particular, in, frankly, the more affordable areas of the district, like Penwyn. So my concern is Penwyn is actually under projected in terms of your growth for it. And that school is not going to hold that. I mean, as it is, as I understand it, the design is going to take 40% of the available green space. In addition to, I second, the traffic concerns and the safety. It's really hard to get in and out of that school as it is around those times. So I just really want to second the idea that Ms. I'm sorry, I'm not going to say her name right, Di Bonaventura said, if you could find 15 acres along that southern corridor, it seems like that would really support long-term growth in a different way. It would relieve the pressure on those schools without destroying the character. I understand it's a historic building, Penwyn, so there's a desire to keep some of that preserved. But if you could find the space there, I, as a taxpayer, would be much happier paying for that than for, you know, the temporary classroom idea taking up all the, Penwyn's not a big, doesn't have a big campus anyway, and you're going to lose a bunch of the green space for the kids to be out. You're going to have a lot of problems with the neighborhood, and I think you're still, as you were saying, you're still going to get flooded with more people coming in. So it seems to me at some point you need a new school, and the issue is how do we start looking for and funding that.
So, yeah, I may, perhaps I didn't explain myself well. Live birth does figure into the calculation, but the reason that the demographers changed the progression is because the live birth predictor had not worked for several years. So, in fact, that's why you see a different line.
Ben Meyer.
My name is Ben Meyer, 247 Rock Glen Road, Wynwood. I have 1 kid in Penwyn, 3 kids that have gone through Penwyn. I'd like to put up a slide. It's a PDF. If I could have a little clip, just real quick.
Mr. Meyer, I'm sorry. Would you mind just giving us your comment and walking us through, and the board will be happy to look at that. We have a number of folks who want to speak tonight.
Okay, it might be possible. It might be the audience might want to see it as well. Just these numbers are pretty pertinent, I think, to the previous person went through. I just don't want to give you my copy if I can't put it up. And you can have.
We don't have the technology in this room to put up a
USB. I have my computer.
Well, I mean, if you want to use your 3 minutes to get it up, that will not be.
Okay, this is the most important thing I want to do.
I would rather you use
Do you have it on
Yes.
USB? Let me see if I, it's okay if I do this?
Here, thank you. Thank you for passing it around. Thank you. Basically, what I did was I took. I don't know if you can hear me. Terrible public speaker. It's the. What I did was I took Google Maps and just looked at all the free space.
What's the name of your file?
Thank you. Thanks. It's a PDF. It's at the bottom somewhere.
So, Mr. Meyer, I'm going to ask if you give us your comment. Again, we appreciate the documents, and the board and the administration will take time to look at those.
Okay, so here it is on your screen. He's bringing it up right now. Basically, Penn Valley has, taking your numbers for the number of students, okay, Penn Valley has 723 students, or projected to have shortly. The outdoor area is, I pulled it up at the same size to scale.
I'm not sure why this is not coming out.
14.83, so the ratio is 49. So that ratio of students to area, this includes the blacktop area and the field space is 49. Thank you, it's right there on the screen. So Penn Valley has the best ratio. So you talk about student to teacher ratio. I'm talking about student to open play area on the field. So Penn Valley's the best. Gladwin's second at 120% of Penn-Win. Marion is 188% of Penn-Win. Kenwood is 207% of Penn-Win. Belmont Hills 234%. Penn-Win with option 4. Now I talked about option 4 the last time I was here, and option 4 at Penn-Win involves putting 6 classrooms and the gym on the left on the side of the hallway of the 1949, which you'll see that map there. And Penn-Win with option 4 is 315% ratio between Penn Valley and Penn-Win option 4. Option 1, Penn-Win, which I think you're seeking approval of in May, we will be at 357% higher ratio of students to area, density, if you will, of playground on the area. A study in England said that, that actually prisoners get more time outside than the school children in England. I don't think that, because kids today are using the screens so much. It's very important for their well-being. So I'm formally asking you to request respectfully, because I know how hard the Pat and his team work, and they have deadlines and many things going on at schools. I'm requesting that you respectfully take the time and the money to check the costs and the pros and cons. I have handed out the pros and cons, and I'll give them to Pat and the architect as well right now. But to look at that and seriously consider option 4, because it doesn't take away the green space, and during the 2 years of construction or thereabouts, the kids will have a much larger use of the field, because the construction would take place on a parking lot. The pertinent part of this, which I don't have on the screen, is that there would be an in and out bus right on Haverford. So it would be in and out real quick on Haverford, and would keep the buses out of our neighborhood.
So thank you very much, Mr. Meyer. Your 3 minutes is up. I want to invite the next speaker to come forward. We appreciate the information, and we'll certainly consider it. Can we have the next speaker, please? And let me just remind the audience as well as the board that, again, we are exploring options. We are not making decisions, and so this is an opportunity for us to have a dialogue and to have a discussion versus making decisions. So I don't want folks to feel anxious to make that we're making a decision tonight. However, we do have information in front of us that suggests that we need to think very thoughtfully and critically about what's necessary with Penn-Win in particular. So next speaker, please. And we're going to limit the 3 minutes to make sure everyone who wants to speak has an opportunity.
Julie Williams.
Hello, I am Julie Williams. I live in Wynwood. I have a daughter at Penn-Win in Mrs. Lord's class with Tommy, Dr. Van Lynch, Maggie. I have a few concerns, pretty strong concerns actually, about adding on to Penn-Win and undergoing construction at that school. We already know that Penn-Win is the largest elementary school in our district, and we are asking Penn-Win, its students, and its teachers to bear the brunt of the continued growth of population in this area. It is already 110 students more than Marion. It's 160 students more than the smallest school in this district. We're talking about increasing the size of the student body by about 30% of the already largest school in the district. This is clearly going to have effects on our children. I am very concerned about specials. We know specials are important to this district, and they're important to these kids. And if you have this many more students and many more classrooms, you are going to reduce the time that students have in specials, either the time within a day, maybe from 30 minutes to 20, or the days of the week that they will receive their specials. Also, recess will clearly be impacted. The kids are already jammed in. They're not allowed to run at recess. And so that's because there's so many. And the teachers need to keep the kids safe, but there's so many they can't run. And we're just going to increase that. We're going to have decreased personalized attention of these kids. These are kids, and I'm not hearing a lot about the impact on the kids. They're already kind of a number. You know, the school has to be run kind of like a factory. Get them in, get them out, get them where they need to go. And, you know, they need individual attention. They're young kids. So I'm really concerned as we continue to increase the student size, it's going to negatively affect the educational experiences of our children. Another concern I have is in terms of actually undergoing the construction for at least 15 months at an elementary school. We are talking about noise pollution, which will have a negative effect on the education of the students for the entire time of the construction period. The United States EPA has stated that school construction also can adversely affect student health. It has been shown to increase absenteeism due to breathing problems and headaches and chest pains. The off-gassing of materials, the volatile organic compounds, the chemical fumes have not only short-term but long-term health effects on our children. And remember, these are young, small children. So the headache that you might have experienced from new paint, they get double, triple, because they're smaller and they breathe faster at a faster rate. Also, you're going to have construction dust, and there are a lot of kids at that school with asthma, including my daughter. And so it's really tough for them to tolerate a decline in the indoor air quality of our school. So I have concerns about that. Now, I want to be clear that I certainly understand there's a population growth problem here. Maybe not a problem, but there's extreme population growth. We need to do something to address it. It's clearly an emotional issue. You guys have emotion about it. We have a lot of emotions about it. And something has to be done. But I just feel that I'm not sure why Penn Win has to bear the brunt of all this increased population. I think it's really great. I applaud your decision to go forth with these partner schools. That's a tough decision. And I think that it's important that you make these tough decisions and not the easy, fast decision. I do urge you to consider new boundaries and building a new school for a longer term plan rather than continually saying, here's what we have right now, that's fixed, that's fixed, that's fixed, that's fixed, right? Building another school perhaps really would be a longer term solution. And I know nobody likes to talk about it, but I think altering class sizes should be considered. The primary driver of this decision should not be the school rankings. It should be our kids.
Your 3 minutes are up.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you
All
for
right.
your comments, appreciate it.
Chris Prendergast?
Hi, I'm Chris Prendergast, co-president of Penn Valley Civic Association, and I have a daughter in Harriton High School. I have a question and comment regarding the companion school policy. My understanding is that you will honor walk zones for this policy, and so that children who are districted to another elementary school and new families who move into that neighborhood, should they be in the walk zone, they will continue to be able to attend that elementary school. Is that correct?
So the regulation says that will be given preference.
Okay. Now, in the specific case for Penn Valley Elementary, we are a school that is, a strong neighborhood school. We have a lot of attendance in our neighborhood, but we don't have any sidewalks, and therefore we don't have an official walk zone. So my own home is 3/10 of a mile from Penn Valley Elementary School, but we are bused to elementary school. Should my neighbors move and have a new family coming in, under the companion school policy, it sounds as if you would take that option of moving them to another school if there were not space at Penn Valley. And I'm a little concerned that this policy will disproportionately affect schools like Penn Valley and Gladwin who don't have very large walk zones. Thank you.
Sharon Weinstein?
Hi, I'm Sharon Weinstein. I live in Penn Win. I'm part of the Civic Association. I live across the street from the school. I just wanted to comment on the presentation, talked about the stabilization, neighborhood stabilization option, I think it was called, and it had a list of pros and cons. But I really think there was a lot missing from the con. Most importantly is space for the children. There was no mention in there of the fact that we're going to have so little play area, outdoor play area space or indoor community space for our kids if we keep adding on classrooms to Penn Win Elementary. That's my number one point. My number 2 point is I think, while I really appreciate you opening up this forum, I don't really feel like it's a conversation when you have 3 minutes to speak. where I feel like we're being spoken at, we're given long presentations, and then we get to rush in a little blurb like it's a debate in high school. I really think we need more time to be heard. Thank you.
I just want to add that the administration has gone out at least 2 to 3 times to talk directly to the Civic Association, and we have had opportunities to have a more robust dialogue, but given the number of folks that we have here this evening, it seemed prudent to allow folks at least a modest amount of time to speak, and this is not the last of the conversation, Ms. Weinstein. So I just want to add that because I do think that in some regards, I'm not fully agreeing with your point.
Okay. Well, I'll add to my point is I've gone to these presentations and I also feel at those that I'm being spoken at and don't get very much time to respond. It's just not intimate and small enough to really be a conversation, especially with the Penguin parents, and it's been very difficult to, like, we keep on trying to talk about having other options explored as to where the expansion is and getting good reasons why they're not happening, why option 4 isn't really being explored very thoroughly. We get like a quick line, oh, it's too expensive to put in a parking lot, it's $1.5 million, like just things thrown at us. It's very hard to understand how the decisions are being made. We're not being given enough information to feel, you might be thoroughly vetting them in the committees and in the facilities committee, but we're not experiencing that vetting process, so it seems like decisions are being handed down from above without us understanding why they're being made. Thank you.
Shelby Sparrow.
Hi, I'm Shelby Sparrow. I live at 1201 Manoa. I have 2 children at Penguin, and I'm the president of the Penguin Civic Association. I'm glad to hear that there seems to be at least a little bit of discussion about other possibilities in terms of opening a new school, or the word redistricting has actually been spoken here tonight, and I haven't really heard that on the table so far. And I know it's a complicated issue, but I'm happy to hear that it's being considered, because I think that, again, there are a lot more cons than I saw on the list in terms of adding 6 classrooms and a gym to Penguin. I don't think that solves, it adds classroom space, but in terms of maintaining the special opportunities for students that we talk about and having great facilities, you're going to add all those students, but how many more students can the core facility take in terms of the specials, in terms of the IEP programs, in terms of, again, not having field space, recess time, PE time uses the field space, not to mention the other things that make the school very special, the extra types of activities that go on in the field space, both with the school and in the community. I think that's being overlooked and not really discussed. And I don't know, I haven't seen a number. What is the maximum number the core facility can handle? All of the other schools seem to have at least a nice field space. Some of them have 2 fields. And we're talking about building on to Penguin, and once that's gone, it's gone. That green space will not come back, and that will be a severe loss. I just think that, when we talk about having quality facilities and quality programs and what makes Lower Merion fantastic, I think we're talking about taking that away from Penguin Elementary. And if we add that on and then we get down the road and say, oh, well, we have to redistrict anyway because Bala-Cynwyd Middle School can't handle the influx and we didn't see that coming, then what have we done? I just think that the big picture needs to be looked at, and I'm glad that there's some communication going on about it, but I think there needs to be more.
Richard Churchill.
Hello, I'm Rick Churchill. I live at 238 Cross Hill Road in Penguin. I've had 2 kids that go through Penguin, and I'm also the commissioner there. I just wanted to make a couple of points. The first is that you are not under a compressed timeline. That, Diana, you are correct that the intent of the commissioners is not to hurt students, that we're not going to be yanking out any temporary buildings and leaving literally hundreds of students defend for themselves. What we want to do, and I mean we, is the Board of Commissioners and the neighborhood. We want to work together with you. And to that point, I appreciate that the leadership on the Board of Commissioners and the school board leadership have begun meeting. We have begun meetings with neighborhood and school officials in dealing with current traffic issues. And we would hope that this is creating a positive atmosphere for cooperation. The biggest concern that we have in Penn Win is with the permanent addition, and I would hope that on building with this cooperation that we can continue to listen to the neighbors in if we have to have a permanent expansion, please listen to us. And we feel that we have created enough time that a dialogue and a win-win situation can occur, and that's all I have to say tonight. Under 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you.
David Park.
Hi, my name is David Park. I live at 1411 Suffolk Lane. So if you're keeping track, that's right across the street from Penn Win Elementary School. I've been there for about 13 years. I bought my house from an older woman whose children had gone to Penn Win Elementary School. So yes, indeed, I do believe that a lot of the growth is coming from this kind of thing. I have other neighbors who have moved out on the corner. That property just sold, I'm sure. With 5 bedrooms, it will now have lots of children living there. It's just going to continue. I was kind of interested that there was an option for a separate kindergarten. My understanding is that there is a 5th grade that goes to Penn Win, and I wondered if there was an option for 5th grade to move to the middle school. So I didn't know if anybody had considered that. I did, when I first heard about this, I sent an email to the school district, said I was very interested in this, and have you considered any properties in Philadelphia where I think the property would be a lot cheaper? And in fact, there's a Sears property that's sitting right across the border from Penn Win that has lovely parking and a 12-foot high fenced section so that no kids can run away and nobody can get in. I was told we would never consider such a thing, nor would Philadelphia, but I still bring it up again. I also wonder if anybody has raised the option of potentially swapping properties, because there are several properties in Penn Win that are currently used as schools or other things of the sort, and they might be interested in taking on a property that's less strategically located for us. What about the administration building? Seems that that one would be an easy one to move people to someplace else and put students back into it. I heard some rumblings about the projected cost of Penn Win versus the overall 17 to 35 million. I haven't heard the projected cost of the Penn Win renovations, and I'd be curious to hear what those are. My big question, living right across the street, you know, it's a very lovely property, has very nice trees. I would like to see them stay there. I was a little upset to see one of them disappear when I was on vacation. I think perhaps that was potentially done because one of the plans showed a nice new driveway going right over top of where that tree used to stand. But I'd like to keep as many of the existing trees as possible. I'm also very concerned about stormwater management. I really hate when my basement floods, and I know a lot of people downhill from Penn Win Elementary School have had those kinds of problems. Noise, it is a gigantic, hard surface, and it was built like a whispering wall. People can have very nice little conversations right outside the front doors. Sounds like they're in my bedroom. Construction activity, I think people already brought that up. That's a real nuisance. It was a real pain. I've heard from the neighbors the last time the school was renovated. I wasn't there, but that's going to be bad. Parking is already bad. There are a lot of people. We have a back alley. They do not have parking spaces. I'm almost finished. I don't know if you've realized it's the only ball diamond south of Haverford, and part of the problem that people had when we went to the planning meeting, and I think that might be why you heard what you did on the 2-year timeline, they're putting the temporary buildings on top of part of the ball diamond. We need our green space. It's already the most densely populated portion of the school district. We need to, keep our green space. And finally, I would like to add that you should add a neighbors section to the website for those of us who don't have children in the school district, but who live somewhere close to the school and are concerned about what's happening in the school. And I would like to encourage you to put all events that impact the neighborhood onto that website, including things like this. I've been monitoring that page, and I'm not seeing the events. Please try to keep us involved. Thanks.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Olga Rude.
Just before the next speaker gets up, Mr. Spar, the architects, the cost of the Penwin project?
Which option would you like me to?
Well, the first option I think was about 10.
Yeah, the first option was 9.15, and with the extended addition at the site was 9.5. That's the top being extended, not the bottom.
Can you go to the mic for us, Damien?
I'll repeat it. So it's 9.5 was the original, and then option.
So the first option where the second floor was not out all the way and a flat wall with the first floor was 9.15 million. The second option where we had more classroom space on the top floor, that was what we called extended but not extended footprint, that was 9.55 million. The addition at the front, which was option 2, was 14.7 million, and option 4 isn't fully priced out yet.
Thank you.
Hi everybody, I will be very short because I'm not fluent in English. I'm French. We live in 409 Conshohocken State Road, Olga Bro, and I have 4 children, 3 in Kinwood Elementary School. And we just moved from France in September, last September. We could be responsible for growth of natality versus growth of enrollment because of 4 kids. We, as many family recently newcomers, rent a house in Kinwood area and want to purchase a house next year. And it could be in Penwin area. We don't know yet. It depends on the market. We could be interested in volunteering in the partner school or to switch in if it's in your advantage. But we have to know in advance. How could we apply for that? Is there any form? Is there any officialization for that? And most generally, could we stay in a school if we move in the district if it's not near the capacity of the full capacity? Because in France, it's a rule. Here in the district, we have to move. When we change area, it could be 1 street, and we have to move. Could we just think about this opportunity? I think it won't solve the problem of Penwin, but perhaps a little. Thank you so much.
It's a beginning. It's who gets the? I'm looking at Mrs. Schaefer. Who gets the request for attendance exceptions?
It should come to my office. It can be directed to Kathy Gallagher or myself.
So.
Joseph Abramson.
Joseph Abramson, 10 Montgomery Avenue, Bala, Kinwood. So a lot of the residents here already spoke about the children's side of things, which of course is the #1 priority. So I just want to bring a couple of points to keep in mind, not necessarily that are actionable right now, just things to remember. A lot of these programs, or a lot of the costs that were mentioned, will ultimately fall back onto the taxpayers. And one of the things to please keep in mind is that you're going to eventually price out the lower to moderate income residents of Lower Merion, because as you approach $10,000, $15,000 in property taxes, they're just going to move. And I don't know if you want that. A second thing that I just want to mention, the superintendent mentioned a couple of different plans and mentioned some are proactive and some are reactive. But ultimately, all plans are reactive to the Board of Commissioners approving or not approving new residential developments. And that's something that the residents and the school board maybe should take some sort of action item. And thank you. So I think that the school board perhaps, or some residents perhaps, should have some sort of working group that before the Board of Commissioners approve new development, because we're already at capacity, perhaps they should meet with the school board and say, hey, we just got a plan in that's going to have another 100 apartments. What will that do to the school district? Because nobody wants to cut funding, nobody wants to cut class size, increase class sizes, but eventually something's going to have to give. It's going to either be a huge increase in property tax or a huge decrease in school activities. And finally, I just want to just mention, the superintendent mentioned that, and I might be off on the numbers, but 76% of the school budget is on teacher salaries. So perhaps the next time teacher salary comes up for negotiation, to please keep that in mind, because we don't want to cut funding to school activities, we don't want to cut funding to anything, and we don't want to cut teacher salaries. But eventually, something's going to have to give. We don't, and you know, we should keep that in mind, because right now, this teachers, you mentioned that a new teacher comes in, that's $100,000, or a school assistant comes in at $60,000. Both of my parents were public school teachers, and if they ever cleared $70,000 a year, that would be a great year. And nobody's saying that teachers don't deserve a great salary. They do. But in 2016, teacher salaries plus teacher pensions is not what the private sector is getting. Public sector versus private sector, at this point in time, public sectors are making a lot more than the average private sector salary, especially in Lower Merion. Thank you.
Ruth Jenkins.
I'm Ruth Jenkins. I live in Wynwood. And a couple of things. First of all, the introduction that this is a courtesy. I think this is an obligation, not a courtesy to the people of Lower Merion. Secondly, two of my grandchildren attended Penwyn Elementary School. The elementary school playground area is not just a school playground, but it's a community playground. And it's used because of small backyards. It's used by the whole community as an event place where they play baseball, they play after school, and it's used on the weekends. The next thing I wanted to address was, as we talk about all of these large elementary and middle schools, they will all siphon into our high schools, which are going to be, especially Lower Merion, will be overcrowded. And I'm wondering if that partnership program can be applied to the Lower Merion area and bus these students that register late to Harriton. Thank you.
Rita Thomas.
Good evening. My name is Renita Thomas. I live at 1315 Rutland Lane. I'm a parent at Penwyn School with 3 children at Penwyn. One will be there next year. So I too am adding to the increase of the Penwyn School. I'm also the president of the HSA at Penwyn School. I just wanted to say, as the president of the HSA, I felt a really strong obligation to talk tonight, because last week at our HSA meeting, we were really lucky enough to have Ben Meyer come to our meeting and really talk up the option 4 to us and explain it to all of us and what it means and what the benefits are and what the downsides are. And and unanimously, the HSA at Penn feels that in our interests, that option 4 is our best choice as far as what will allow our children to have the most green space, what will give our children the most amount of classroom space, and what will not interrupt their learning the most. I fully understand that this is a beautiful building from Haverford Road, and we don't want to mess with the front of the building. So the fact that there is so much green space at the front of the building and that could be utilized for a bus lane to come through seems to be such a logical thing to do that when Ben presented that to us, we thought not only from a safety issue, from getting those buses out from the neighborhood, because I don't want to tell you how many times I have driven around Penn School getting my kids out, and kids are walking across Trent, walking across Suffolk, buses are crossing there, school buses, people are walking, cars are coming. It's a two-way street. It is so dangerous. If there would be a way to get the school buses out of that section and keep them on Haverford Road, I just think that would be safer all around. In addition, we'll lose less green space for the kids to play. And I just want to say yesterday, Mr. Copeland and I and a few other people in this room were at an Ask the Superintendent meeting yesterday for approximately 2.5 hours. And at that meeting, there were 20 parents who talked about, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Copeland, the importance of recess, the importance of increasing recess time in Lower Merion School District, and how little time our children have for recess, which right now is 25 minutes a day, which includes lining up and getting back into the building. So realistically, they're playing for 15 minutes a day, which I don't have to say, we all have children, how difficult that is for kids who are young, difficult for me to sit still for this long. So I just think that it's very, very important that we think about the space for our children, where they are, that we make sure we have field space. Obviously, getting our kids outside and running around is something that's very important. I've been to a lot of those Ask the Superintendent meetings. We've never had 20 people at a meeting on a Sunday. So recess time and getting kids outside is important. We appreciate the opportunity to tell you all this. We are really appreciative that someone like Ben Meyer, who's an engineer, who we're not paying a huge salary to work up this option 4, took the time to do this for us. And I feel it's our obligation to look at this, look at the financials, and if this is an overall wonderful option for our school and for the community and for the children, most importantly, we have an obligation to look forward to that option. Thank you.
I just want to indicate that the board and the administration did not ignore the option. In fact, took the option. Initially, as I understand it, there were concerns that were raised by the Historic Commission. The architect and our administration went back to the Historic Commission. They've got a couple of other options that we can look at over time. So I just want to dispel any concern that we didn't take it seriously and are not currently looking at it as an option. It's 2 hours and 34 minutes.
But who's counting, right?
We're all in the last 5 minutes of the game anyhow. Don't worry about it.
My name is Marie Beresford. I live in Ardmore. I have 2 daughters at Lower Merion High School. So first, thank you. I don't know why you do this, but thank you for doing all of this that you do. And I just want to say that I think a big priority that I understand you're still having conversations, but I hope that keeping class size small remains a huge priority. I am a teacher myself, and I know how important it is to provide the quality of education. It's very clear that people are here for the schools. So again, you're doing something very right. I just hope that that can remain a priority. And I guess a question that I know you can't answer, but something that I wonder about is what information the township actually provides to you. I think it was echoed here a couple other times, but what information are the commissioners actually providing on developments and how that affects? Because clearly that's affecting enrollment and how that can sort of work out better moving forward. Thank you.
Okay, so I want to thank everyone for their attention and comments. Okay, so if you would like to speak, please sign in. We're closing the list right now.
Speak.
Hi, my name is Maxine Goldberg, and I've lived in Lower Merion Township for 46 years. Both of my sons went K through 12, Kinwood, BC, Lower Merion, and had wonderful educations, went to great schools after that. However, I must tell you, I've watched the coming and going of many schools. The Bala School, which was destroyed, only a gym now. The Bala School that was built on Highland Avenue. The Wynwood School, which is now Torrey Academy. The Narberth School, which is, I'm not sure what the status of the Narberth School is. And other schools, the Belmont Schools, which was closed and brought back again. I've watched it ebb and flow for many years. My question to you is, I'm also a real estate broker in the Township of Lower Merion. I see other facilities, some churches, some other kinds of buildings that are no longer being used or available for lease. And I'm wondering what might be made to be viable for you for perhaps a kindergarten. It isn't a perfect solution. Perhaps as populations may rise and fall, it might be an alternative for you throughout the township, particularly going west. There's only one school to deal with a very large population of a geographic amount of school, of geographic amount of land. And I realize that the population is clearly on the lower end. I live in Bala-Cynwyd. So I'm clearly aware of that, but I also think if the kids are bused to nothing is that far away in Lower Merion Township, that the kids, elementary school kids, kindergarten kids, can't be bused to a full day kindergarten class that might be viable somewhere within the township. So I don't know whether leaving the township was viable. I remember when school buses had a thought of moving outside of Philadelphia, which was not approved by the city of Philadelphia. So going past our borders may not be viable, but certainly there are places throughout the township. I'm sure you've thought of many of these. I can promise you there are other places that perhaps you haven't investigated. So I hope you can think in terms of an alternative to simply building a school, and then at some point in time close that school because the population has declined. So that's it. Thank you very much. I appreciate what you do. It's very hard. There's never an easy answer. I've been through redistricting 3 times, never been fun. So I appreciate how hard you work in order to make things work out well for you. So thank you. Appreciate what you do.
Hi again. My name's Tanya Schreiber. I live at 246 Rock Glen Road in Penwyn, across the street from the school. And I think one of the things that you've probably all heard me say before is all of the easy decisions, the ones that are politically comfortable, they've all been taken. All the inexpensive ones have all been taken. Anything that happens now is going to be politically difficult, painful, and or expensive. And so I was really appreciative to hear that there's a thought that when you hear that there's over 1,000 kids coming, that maybe it's time to put a 7th elementary school kind of in the mix, that it's possible that we need to start discussing that because the school that's growing the quickest. The slide that was just shown said that next year you're going to need 35 classrooms. Well, you're only planning to build 37. So if you're using 35 next year and the permanent expansion gets you to 37, then you're going to have a problem is once you go, you're going to add 4 classrooms next year. You can only add 2 more. In 2 years, we're going to be here again with all the problems that we currently have with the traffic and everything, plus 6 more classrooms, et cetera, et cetera. Plus, when you talk about recess, outdoor recess is not the same as indoor when you take away that field for the extent of the entire time that we're doing this construction. Now, I know that I've been at some of these discussions where They said that there was a concern about putting the driveway on the Haverford side, and we didn't think that we'd be able to use the Haverford Road. I just wanted to let you know I called PennDOT. I spoke with Don Setafante, and he said that, that it would be fairly easy to approve a driveway on Haverford Road if it would alleviate some of the congestion on their state road. So as you consider the options and the use of that, I know that there's a concern when it comes to historical facade, but they would have, it sounds like the Historical Society and PennDOT agree that it would be a perfectly fine place for a driveway. Thank you.
Z. Gira.
Hi, my name is Azagera. I live at Tompkin, that's in the Penguin area, and I have one kid in there and one coming soon, so be careful what you wish for. I've been hearing several things, and I have 3 questions. They're not exactly on the same subject. The first one is, I really fail to see the difference in the problems between the cascading, redistricting, and the partnering schools. Both of them create the same type of trouble or problems for the children and the parents, but one of them is kind of a Band-Aid, temporary, as-we-go solution, and another one is permanent. So aside from that, what's the difference between them? That's something I would like to hear. The second thing, and that relates directly to the comments that Ben made and others made about the ratio of student to space at Penn Win. I haven't heard really a discussion about the traffic pattern around them. And as you can see, I have already trouble walking around, but I still walk my kids to school there. And to talk about traffic problems, we will need another meeting that will take more than 3 hours just for that school. How are we going to deal with that when the school is growing by 100 and something students? It's already a problem right now. The wait times on Haverford are significant, and it's only going to get worse. And I don't know, I'm pretty sure it's not under your jurisdiction to resolve that, but it would be interesting to learn what is done and who you talk to and what is the type of communication you have with those who are in charge of solving that, and how do you work together? Because if you don't work together, then that's a problem waiting to explode. And the last one is with regards to recess. I have a 9-year-old who already every day checks the weather, hoping that there's going to be rain during recess. Now, I don't remember when was the last time I was hoping for rain during recess. But he does, and it just dawned on me that he does that because if it rains, he has 25 minutes of playtime with his friends in class. And if it doesn't rain, he has less than 15. So if that's not a concern, it should be, and the fact that you're going to put 2 temporary units and reduce the size of the play area outside is just going to exacerbate that for the short term. And if you're going to build on that, which option 1 and 1A was on, it's just going to make that permanent. And by the way, option 4 has nothing to do with the facade of the school. Only option 2 had to do something with the facade of the school. So that's just the point. Thank you.
Ben Spivak.
Hi, I'm Ken Spivak. I have 3 kids, and one goes to Penguin Elementary School, and she likes it. I live at 1427 Suffolk Lane, which is directly across from the school. I have the unique opportunity that my front yard is the backyard of the school, so I see all the playing that goes on both on school days and then not school days. My concerns are a couple. Seems to be a rush to making a decision, and has to make a decision by May, and at the same time, our options are limited. So I want to know, Superintendent, you have a lot of things on your plate, but will we have an actual cost estimate on option number 4? I heard going back and forth with the architect, but will we actually have that? I mean, is that something that's in play that we'll get that?
Yes, we have it now. Option 4 has evolved.
Oh.
Yeah, you finish.
So that was my concern. I saw the option, and I see how much of the green space is used, and it's used all the time. And apparently I didn't actually believe that my daughter couldn't run during recess, but I understand there's a lot going on. But I'm concerned when they want to take more of the back green and not use the front green. From a parent, that seems a little crazy. And at the last meeting, we had someone talk about the windows for an extended period of time, and I think they lost what was important, and it's the green space on the ground and not the windows around the building. So I wanted to know, as parents, if we're going to figure out, what option 4 is, what it's going to cost compared to the other options. And so they pointed to you. Thank you.
Option 4 was presented, and there's been ideas that the architects had and the administrations had, so it's kind of evolved. I'm not so much sure from Mr. Meyer's point of view, but at least internally, so that we're trying to take what is that idea and make it into the best idea to price out for option 4, although there may be alternatives within option 4. So we are expecting to price that out shortly, and I don't think it's going to take a long time to do that. It's a matter of really nailing down what do we want to price and what are the options within that price. So that's what we were expecting to do in the very near future.
Thank you.
With that, we are adjourned.
I just want to say, facilities is meeting next Thursday, April 14th. So we can, for those of you, we can have another conversation. I'm sorry, I just wanted to get that out.
We are adjourned. Thank you very much for coming.